tonight, and ask that you please turn off your cell phones. And this is a debate sponsored by We the People Greene County, the Fayette Patriots, and the Henry Armstrong Isaac Walton League. And we would like to welcome you here. Our debate tonight will be, even though we only have one candidate here, it will be between the candidates that are running for the District 50 Pennsylvania House Representative position. So we do have Mr. Fischer here. If you would stand, we're going to give him some applause here. Thank you for coming. And we do have, we're very fortunate actually, to have gotten our questions from our organizations, as well as putting them out on the internet and asking people to submit questions. So we have quite a number of questions. I don't know whether we'll get to them, and they're very good questions. Just to prelude this a little bit and introduce myself, my name is Betsy McClure, and I am with We the People Greene County. And just to give you a little history here, that we felt that this position was very important to our district. So we felt that a debate was deserved and necessary for the constituents in Greene County and Fayette, and we felt in Washington County, because we do have a little bit of Washington County also. So we set out to have a debate, and we sent letters to both candidates. Not once, but twice. And the first time, it was kind of a rush. We wanted to get it out, so in the paper it came out that we did some boo-boos. So we made it right, and we submitted another request to the candidates, and having it here, I think you'll all agree, it's a very comfortable atmosphere. And we want to really thank the members of the VFW for allowing us to come here. They did not charge us, and actually gave us, like I said, 6 dates to choose from. So, with that being said, we do have the candidate that we have here tonight, and we thank Mr. Fischer again for coming out. Another thing we're very fortunate to have is two moderators here this evening. We have Dave Show with the Fayette Patriots, who actually has done a number of debates. And we also have Ken DeFallo. He is a conservationist, and he is with the Henry Armstrong Isaac Walton League.
Harry
Engstrom. I'm sorry. Apologize for that. So if we could go ahead and get started. We are starting a little bit late. I apologize for that with the weather. But Dave, I'd like to bring you up first. Dave Show.
Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy to be here and very happy to see you folks come out on such a terrible night. We're going to discuss a couple business items first. As you can see, we do only have one candidate. Pam Snyder did not decide to come out. She refused to come out and face the constituency. But we are not going to change the debate. We're still going to ask her questions. And you can listen for her answer. What we're going to do is we're going to go approximately a minute or two per question. Like I said, we are going to change the format a little bit. But we'll do approximately 2 minutes, since we're not going to have rebuttals. But we're going to try to cover as much territory as we can. I'll do 2 or 3 questions, and I'll bring him up to do some environmental questions as well. And hopefully we'll cover some issues tonight. With that being said, we'll go ahead and start off with the very first question. Normally with the debates we ask that you don't applaud or do anything like that, so that each one of the candidates have equal time. I guess it really doesn't matter this way. You can applaud or not, or however you want to respond to each one of the questions. This is literally the first I've seen these questions, so as we go through these, I'm just going to go down in order as they were submitted to us, and we'll ask Mr. Fischer his response off of it, and we'll go from there. So our very first question for tonight is, how do you feel the gas drilling in the 50th district will impact the area?
I'm sorry, it was gas drilling, you said?
Yes. How do you feel the gas drilling in the 50th district will impact the area?
Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out on a terrible evening like this. It's much appreciated that you're interested enough to want to come and listen to a discussion. As far as the gas drilling, obviously we've taken some leaps lately with the volume and the amount. Now, it's trickled off a little bit late last year when the price of gas dropped noticeably. We've had impacts to the infrastructure that have been heavy. In some cases, the companies doing the drilling have been good neighbors. They've taken care of the problem. In other cases, not so much. Certainly, we have an impact in terms of the environmental issues and the risks from the water that's used in the process, in addition to the infrastructure that takes a bit of a beating. But the other thing is that we're being impacted heavily in the economic areas related to housing, some of the business support of the drilling industry. So it's had a profound effect across many different aspects.
Very good. Now, normally we would ask our challenger tonight, but since again she's not here, we have a pre-programmed response from her for the questions tonight, so we'll go ahead and play that at this time. Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Okay, our second question. With the energy boom in the area, a toll has been placed on the roads and the bridges. Are you in favor of a tax that would be designated for their upkeep? And if so, how would you implement the tax?
Act 13 that was implemented was supposed to address some of these issues. And what happened, once Act 13 was in development, let's say, in the legislative process, it evolved and it creeped. And it's not just restricted now to repairing infrastructure, but it's open to a variety of uses, the funds that are generated on the extraction of the energy. Now, this is the problem. It was created to address some specific areas related to the infrastructure, and then it evolved into I guess a framework in the process where counties and municipalities can use it for virtually anything they wish, under some broad categories, but it lowers the effectiveness. I do believe that the extraction of the energy should pay to repair the damage. The Act 13 funding mechanism could have been effective, and it still could be. But what happened was also the state offset some of those gains with cuts into other areas. And when you allow the governments at the local level to have that flexibility to make the adjustments, well, sure enough, they did, and they're making up losses in one area with the money from the Act 13 revenue. It's not going to get the job done. There's not enough there. So I think the other solution here, too, is a lot more measurement of what actual damage is inflicted in the process to our infrastructure, specifically the roads, bridges. I think that we could study that in a way that would produce better numbers. We would know the true impact. I don't get a sense that the energy companies are upset about repairing things. You know, I've witnessed areas where they have made repairs themselves, but I think they want to be treated fairly, and they want some assurance they're not going to be taken advantage of. Just like the creep in the program to allow spending into other areas, the same thing will happen if we take another bite at this, if the legislature is not serious about doing it the appropriate way.
Thank you. Candidate Snyder, your response, please. Thank you. I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that you made some statements in the Pittsburgh paper about how your constituents, especially the Tea Party, were unfair, even though we've done multiple debates in multiple areas with nothing but rave reviews. Hopefully, at some point in time, you'll also be able to participate in another one, maybe from another office. unfunded mandates by the state and federal agency impact taxpayers? Unfunded mandates, how do they affect the taxpayers in the area?
All right, we're talking about federal mandates?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Unfunded federal mandates is a problem we've been dealing with for quite a while. There is legislation that supposedly addressed this to require additional steps in the process. But the bottom line, what an unfunded mandate is when the higher authority passes on to the lower authority a requirement to do something that's going to cost them money and doesn't provide a funding source to do it. Now, this creep in those areas is reflected in, I believe, the 10th Amendment, where the state, Pennsylvania, could push back against some of these things under that type of action. Also, we have an obligation to resist this. It's evident in things like the Department of Education. Certainly we've seen those kind of problems develop, but it exists in every aspect of government, and we have an obligation to push back at every level. As far as the state passing unfunded mandates down, the best example I could give with that might be in the DEP area, but I think we've gotten away from it to a degree. But at the federal level, it still goes on. And the bottom line is, when we say unfunded mandate, you have to be careful because sometimes it's not clear about the cost that is actually incurred in this. One example I'll give you is small games of chance that just went through. For small organizations, clubs, fire departments, things like the VFW, that are burdened with excessive reporting requirements to meet the legislative requirement. I guess in a sense you could look at that as an unfunded mandate. There were other aspects of control of finances in there that are going to damage the organizations. But the reporting is so cumbersome, they're going to have to spend a lot of money to comply, along with background checks for their employees or their supervisors. So in a sense, that's unfunded mandates. Personally, I don't see the benefit to what they've done. I don't support unfunded mandates, especially at the federal level. I think it's ridiculous. The state has, I believe, a little more flexibility, but at the federal level, we should be resisting.
Can you Snyder, your response again? We do want to give you the opportunity to answer every question. Okay. One more question before we bring up Ken. Can you explain what a right-to-work state is and your thoughts on it for Pennsylvania? This is very apropos for this area.
Yeah, right to work. I've been in a right to work state. I had a career in a right to work state. And basically what it does is there's no ability to compel someone to join a labor union as a condition of employment. One aspect of it. There are others. The bottom line is this is about cost and it's about control. And I believe it's about political fundraising because I think that the idea of compelling someone into a labor union relationship that they may not wish to have. I'm okay if they want to be in a union, but the idea the government's going to mandate you must, I don't think flies for me. A person should be able to work at their own discretion and not be compelled by those kinds of rules. I think it's an intrusion on their freedoms. But the cost is the aspect you have to worry about because it does drive up the cost in all areas. When you see states that are not under the right to work, or under the states that are not covered by right to work, I think you see the costs generally escalate for labor. And I don't think that it's productive because what it amounts to is less people actually wind up working in those situations because of the expense. And I'm not sure that's a good way to operate. So generally, I support right-to-work legislation. The other aspect, I don't know if you have a question about this later or not, would be prevailing wage rules. Okay, I'll just shut up on the prevailing wage then.
Okay, I just want to add a little to that one as well. Has it not proven out publicly so far that states that have right to work, when union personnel are given the opportunity to do right to work, that very seldom do they rejoin the union?
Yeah, generally that's true. I know it's occurred with the things in the the public sector unions in Wisconsin. That was a big aspect of it, that folks left the unions in droves. There was no compulsion to collect dues, was another factor, and people just drifted away and didn't pay the dues. Now, you know, there are two sides to this, and folks are going to look at it from different perspectives. Is that union busting or isn't it union busting? You know, that's really the issue. I know that people are passionate about it. But the bottom line is, I still think the individual should have the freedom to choose. I think, you know, compulsory membership in a union, it doesn't work for me any better than forcing a free person to do anything else against their will that they should otherwise be free not to do. I just don't agree with it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Snyder, I would love to ask you a couple of additional questions as well, especially with the amount of union membership that is in this area. And it's a shame that we probably won't get the opportunities before the election. But the union issue is very strong here. At this time, I would like to bring up Ken. We can have him come on up. We'll get a couple of those questions up. You don't have to use the crickets.
I'm not going to use the crickets, no. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ken DeFallo. I'm with the Harry Engstrom chapter of the Isaac Walton League of Greene County. I also write a column called Nature's Corner. And I was a teacher for 26 years. And I was a park ranger at Ryerson Park, at Ohio Pond State Park, and an environmental interpreter at Parker Dam State Park. I do have a master's degree in aquatic biology, plus a whole bunch of additional credits. So my concern here with the Isaac Walton League, we are a nonpartisan organization. We do not belong to the Tea Party. We do not belong to the Republican Party. We do not belong to the Democratic Party. We are a nonpartisan organization. We feel that you should have a right to know what's affecting your environment and choose that candidate that best fits your ideal. So we have established several questions here, and I'm going to have to put my glasses on to make sure I get these down pat. First question, Mark, for you. And we'll start with you, Mark, since you're
Okay.
It says, 7 years ago, the county lost Duke Lake at Ryerson Station State Park. If elected as representative of the 50th district, what would you do to expedite the return of that lake?
Well, the court battle regarding the lake, as I understand it, comes down to an issue where Consol, which was the mine that did the longwall operation, claimed that the dam could not have been destroyed by the longwall operation. It was too far away. And I've said on the record before, you know, there was no problem before. Once the longwall operation was in, then the dam broke. And to me, you know, I think that's about enough. Really, we didn't have any earthquakes, we didn't have any other problems, so it looks to me like that's the answer. I saw an extraordinarily high cost to replace it, $54 million, I think it was, in the $50-some million range. Seemed like an excessive amount of money. And the other problem that was reported recently is that there's still earth movement associated with this. So we don't want to get in a position where we're rebuilding the dam and we have another movement and further damaging. My point is, I believe that we have experts that can work through these issues. There has to be a way to do this. And we can't leave it open-ended and say it's going to go on forever and we're not going to get Ryerson back. It's unacceptable. I learned to fish in Ryerson. I know many people like to spend time up there. It's a nice park. It should still be there. And I do believe it's the fault of the mining operation in the area. So I think we need to move on very quickly. I'm not really sure there's a lot of options right now as long as the ground is in fact moving, but I think what we need to do is verify these claims are true. I know it's been going back and forth on all the aspects of what damaged the dam and is it in fact stable enough. We can't waste the money. We can't excessively charge Consol for the repair, but we must get that repaired as soon as possible. And the best way is using experts that we choose to give us the facts.
I guess now I'm supposed to say as a response, but since we're not getting a response, we'll just go to
Probably
the
not.
second question. It says the last mile of Dunker Creek has been polluting the stream for more than 100 years. What would you do to correct the problem of the acid mine drainage in the stream?
Now, I believe the area we're talking about is from the Shanapin mine, and I don't know if there was one before that that affected this. There may be another. Dana Cole was lowering the water level in the Shanapin mine in conjunction with their mining operations at Dana. So,
Can't hear very good then.
oh, I'm sorry. I'll lean in a little bit then. So anyway, this Dana has been reducing the level of the Shanapin mine. They have to do it in order to do their mining operations with a risk of flood situation, intrusion. We've got to keep abandoned mines as a target, if you will. Now, in this particular case with Dunker Creek, it works fairly well. I know there's still problems and there's still seepage, but they're reducing the amount of seepage, as I understand it, as they go. This is based on a presentation that I attended, and they demonstrated and produced some pretty good records. So I think we're on the right track. As long as we have abandoned mines, we're going to have the potential to flood and then drain off acid residue, acid water. The only way we're going to get this under control on a larger level to keep this from happening, we have other abandoned mines as well that have water in them. They perk through the ground to different degrees, but Dunkard was an exceptional example. The only way we're going to do this is to look at what we can do on a larger scale to bring these operations into a treatment plant where we can treat the water, reduce the level. This is very expensive. And I don't think we're going to be able to approach this in just a haphazard fashion. And really that's what's been done. This has been done all over the area here. We've got other examples with the seepage as well. We have to look at this in a comprehensive fashion with a larger plan to treat these abandoned mines that we're going to be burdened with. Right now, I understand it falls to DEP, the state of Pennsylvania, to deal with it, and it's quite expensive. If Dana was not doing the pumping off the Shanapin, it would fall about $2.5 million a year additional expense to the state of Pennsylvania. And look at the abandoned mines we have that can add to this. I really can't talk about a more comprehensive plan in this amount of time. So,
Thank you. Question number 3, since we have no response to that. Evidence has proven that the discharges from Emerald Mines and Cumberland Mines have been polluting both 10 Mile Creek and Whiteley Creek and have not been in compliance for the last 5 years. How would you approach correcting this problem?
Not particularly privy to the evidence that you're mentioning. I've heard about it, but I've not seen the evidence to understand this. But the DEP has, enforcement powers and regulatory powers to deal with this. I'll point out that one thing I'm doing in this campaign is I'm not accepting payments and funds from the organizations that typically jump into this, the energy companies, unions, what have you. I'm not accepting the money. I think that the role of a legislator is to be as independent and fair as possible when it comes to solving problems in the district. You're not going to get there if every time you have to make a decision, you have to ask for permission or go to the person that wrote the check to be sure it's okay with them. I'm free of those burdens. I can ask the hard questions and go in and get the data and basically raise a bit of a ruckus over what's really going on. But I've got to apologize. I've not seen the evidence in that, and I can't go much further than that, except to say I'm free from the burdens that would keep me from asking the questions.
Mark, I will be glad to provide the information for you because I have it. And for all of you that are here tomorrow in the Observer Reporter and Friday in the Democrat Messenger, you will find out that steps have been taken against Alpha to correct this problem, to protect our clean water and our air. So you will read about it tomorrow in the paper. You're getting it first from me. I just got the call this morning.
I don't feel so bad.
No, you're getting it first from me. And I'll be glad to sit down with anyone, anywhere to go over this evidence.
Why don't
you give it up? Applicants?
I just want to say, being from Fayette County and not over into the side as much, in just a few minutes, I've learned of a lot of issues that the public I know is not aware of. And this would have been a tremendous opportunity to discuss these issues tonight with both candidates, maybe have some back and forth between them and see exactly where they stand. It's a shame that we weren't able to do that. I feel that it's absolutely the responsibility of anyone running for office to make sure that they come out and face the public, let us see how they interact and see how they feel on particular subjects. I know out of those questions alone that brought up different things that I was not aware of as a citizen, and that's exactly what these kind of forums are for. And I think it's a real shame that we don't have both candidates here for that. But let's go ahead and continue on with the questions we have. In looking at the prevailing wage law, this goes back to our right to work question, I believe. In looking at the prevailing wage law, how do you feel the law is impacting local jobs, prevailing wage with local jobs in the area?
Well, understand what prevailing wage is. Prevailing wages, if the government spends money, spends dollars, they have to pay at a prevailing, what's determined to be the prevailing rate, which is higher than normal for the area. That's the way it is. And I think what happens with prevailing wage driving costs up, I'll give you an example. If a school district wants to build a new school, they're going to have to pay the labor on that job the prevailing wage, or it has to be at least factored into the equation. It drives the cost of the project up, limits what can be done with a dollar. Anytime that's done, you're going to have less employment as a result. I mean, it's going to restrict. It's a little bit like the minimum wage argument, and I've heard forever about how minimum wage is a solution, but minimum wage also depresses the number of people that can be employed, because any business that has to pay higher amounts are going to have less dollars to employ people with. There's a standard argument, is it worth it? Should they get the higher numbers? But what it does is it greatly affects young people that should be paid less, new people in the workforce, things like that. It drives the wages up in an uncompetitive manner. Again, I have experience in both systems, prevailing wage and areas without the effects of prevailing wage. It only applied on federal projects, not the rest of them. And costs were considerably lower, and it was easier to accomplish things. I think we have to address everything right now that causes us to spend more money as a state. We don't have it to spend. Our pension system is in the negative. So many other things that we're trying to do are unfunded or underfunded. Transportation is another one of those. You've got to look at where you can bring savings into the picture. And I do think prevailing wage is one of them. It's a fact of life. If we are reducing the number of people employed through prevailing wage rules, we're going to have more people we have to pick up the burden on that are not able to have a job. And it seems like an artificially high number.
Well, and again, this is a question that's brought up that I wish we had the opportunity to expand on. I know with the other candidates' views on with the big unions and such, there's a lot more to this issue, the Davis-Bacon Act, and the things you can research with that. A lot of people feel that act was done, for a completely different time than what we're facing now, and I'm sure we would have differing opinions tonight if we would have a chance to discuss it. But I encourage you to look that up as well and do your own research on some of that and try to make an assumption on where each candidate's at. Our next question. Liquor stores are currently state-owned and operated. Your thoughts on privatization of the liquor stores?
Yeah, you picked one of my pet peeves there. I've been ranting about this since long before I was a candidate. The liquor stores that we have in Pennsylvania came about as a result of Prohibition. After Prohibition was removed in the 1930s, and Prohibition meant alcohol was not available in a bar or an establishment. It was only available for medical purposes. You had to go to a doctor, con them into giving you a slip so you could go get some medicinal alcohol. Now, once that went away, Pennsylvania chose to control alcohol sales through the liquor store system. I understand right after Prohibition, we saw anytime you you prohibit something, it's going to go into the black market or under organized crime. And we know the stories about alcohol. It was absolutely the case. I mean, the organized crime profited immensely from it. So Pennsylvania said, we're going to regulate this. It's a risk. It's a problem. I get it. That was the 1930s. Now, you know, it's 2012. Why on earth would we still believe this is going to be a problem? We look at other states around the nation, and we see private liquor stores that operate without any issues. My opponent today in the Observer claimed that if we allowed the state stores to be privatized, it would increase sales of alcohol to minors. Now, this is absolute ridiculous thinking. You have bars already all over the state. If alcohol is going to find its way to a minor, it's going to do it under those systems. Liquor stores, when you go to private liquor stores, out of state control, you generally see a better selection. I know we have when we've traveled. You have a more flexible work environment in many cases. You're not going to have employees that are in the union receiving state pensions. But the reality is, it's not a public good. Public good is something that can only be provided by the public sector. It would not be provided by the private sector. Alcohol retail locations are something that certainly will be provided, you know, through the private sector. It doesn't require government. It's a waste of money. And when you look at the bureaucracy, I've heard time after time, it's an enterprise operation that saves money. That's baloney, because it adds to the burden of government. And the more we focus into areas like that, instead of what we need to be focused on, the poorer performance we're going to have. And if you could just indulge me for one more go-round on this issue.
Any problems? No, speaks to me.
She's fine with that? Okay, appreciate that. Well, I'm passionate about the alcohol thing because it really does aggravate me. Recently, and you haven't heard a lot about this, but it was a Tribune review that covered the selection of a state wine. It is a state brand of wine that's going to be sold. It's Table, I believe it's Table Leaf, Table something. It's in the Tribune review. If you just go into Tribune review and search for liquor stores, you're going to see the article. I can't quote it off the top of my head, but I can tell you that the bottom line was the two people employed by the Liquor Control Board to make this decision both denied making the decision to make this wine the official Pennsylvania wine. And here's another one. It's not even made from grapes grown in Pennsylvania. What are we doing here? And I believe somebody will go to jail, and I hope they do over that little scheme once it's fully developed. But we've got to take a look. This is absolutely not an area that our government needs to be focused on in the pressing times that we face, the budget problems, the other issues we have to deal with. We should privatize this, do it quickly, get out of the business. Thank you.
Well, again, this is a question that I know there's some differences from candidates on, and you quoted the story in the paper that I would have liked to have done a follow-up on. My question to both of you would have been, with the state's budgetary problems we're having right now, and especially since one of the very top, I believe in the top 4, is our retirement funding and whatnot from the state workers. Just how we're going to continue to pay for those state liquor board members' pensions when it's not generating additional revenue. And evidently there is a difference between the two of you on that. So maybe just a word on the state budget on that end of it.
Well, the folks that are in that system are covered under the pension plans funded by the state. We're running somewhere around a couple of $2 billion shortfall, and it's going to increase in just a few years. I think it's going to be $4.5 billion with a B that we're going to have to come up with. This is unsustainable. We can't do this. Look, I mean, and the problem with the pensions goes to the defined benefit concept. When you have a defined benefit, the employer is on the hook to pay that amount of money that's defined in that benefit, regardless of market conditions. I think we all know those kinds of plans are what brought down some of the major union funds that we had out there, and some companies, private companies, that had massive defined benefit pension plans, and they went really broke trying to keep up with it. You can't do it. What we can't do to fix this, though, is take it out on the workers that are in there that have been in the system and expect that. I don't advocate doing that. I don't think we have to do that. We have to make a plan for the future about how our pension plans are going to operate that are sustainable. Adding members to this through the liquor control system, number one, needs to stop. We need to privatize this as quickly as possible. Move those employees in that system either into other positions or into stores. Maybe it's a phased approach where you sell off the stores over a period of time so they don't get as impacted. The bottom line, though, is every one of those employees are going to add to the impact that we have to pay to make these pension plans whole. And I don't agree that we can just slash and burn on these pension obligations. The politicians before me made the commitment. These folks, accepted the working conditions, the agreements. They worked under the expectation that money would be there. We have an obligation to deal with it. We can't walk out on it. But we can't keep going this way. We've got to end it now.
Okay. With our normal debates that we've held in the past, to keep it fair for both candidates, what we've always done is we've alternated questions. Obviously, we can't do that tonight, so it's a little unfair for Mark on this end of it because you have to answer the question first all the time.
Right.
What is nice is when we have it under our normal system is you get a chance to see both candidates under the stress of answering that question on the very first term. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that tonight, but maybe down the road we'll get a chance. This next question, actually, I'm kind of thinking there may be some agreement on both sides. I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming so. Act 2 of 2012, or the small game of chance legislation, and this is something that touches near and dear to my heart. I was a firefighter for a long, long time, and I know how hard it is to fund things. The small game of chance is soon to come into law. There is a lot of major concern from several organizations. Can you tell us what you know about this act and the amendments to it? And has there been any proposed or other information that as an elected person from the 50th district you might be able to discuss?
Sure. The small games of chance legislation was developed. It was to replace some previous, I think it was 1988 legislation. It was on the books. There were problems in some areas. My research is preliminary. I've looked into it. I have not found evidence of some catastrophic problem that we were trying to address. But when you tell a legislator there's a problem, traditional ones, we want to make new legislation, fix, change, regulate, get government into it more. And I believe that's what happened with the small games area right now. We're in trouble. This legislation, I don't think, was looked at as far as impact on clubs and organizations. It forces them to do extraordinary reporting. They have to do it for smaller amounts of winnings, as an example, than a casino. Now that makes no sense to me, but that's what's in there at this point. They have to have their membership background check, things like that. There's a 70-30 split in there you should be aware of. 70-30 is dealing with charitable contributions. If an organization like the VFW has an event, raises $100, $70 of that money has to go to charity. Only $30 of that $100 can go to the organization. It doesn't work that way in real life. These organizations depend on the games of chance that they have to keep the doors open. The bottom line is people here like clubs like this. They like organizations. Now, fire departments are still bound by this. There's a little difference there. They don't have to follow the 70-30. They can do things for equipment funds or what have you. But the idea that the heavy hand of the government is going to reach into our small clubs and organizations out there and impose these extraordinary regulations is just wrong. We could do something, I believe, that would be much more simple, easy to understand, and less burdensome on the organization. So you got to ask yourself, what's this about? Is this really about solving a problem? Or is this about driving the business into casinos? Is it about restricting, putting clubs basically out of business? and limiting the competition for casinos. I'm suspicious that that's what's going on. The other thing is deciding, in some of the language, who wins, who loses as far as clubs, because of the way they're made up. It's unacceptable. And as far as fire departments, I find it ridiculous that Pennsylvania is going to step in and do any type of regulation there that's going to hurt those organizations. If they want to do that, let them pay to put firefighters in these stations and see what happens to our budgets then. Okay, the volunteer fire departments are the best deal we have right now. It's an incredible service to the community and a great value. We spend very little to have good fire protection. So Pennsylvania needs to think about that. Now, what do we do to fix it? Right off the bat, go to Harrisburg in January. What needs to happen is we need to stop this legislation from taking effect. The majority of the provisions impact starting February 15th. We don't have much time to stop this. We need to stop the legislation at this point, go back to what was there in '88, identify what the real problems are, and then do the right thing. We need to look and talk to the organizations that are going to be affected and find out what the impact of the proposed solution is going to have. This is typical of so much of the legislation that comes out of Harrisburg and Washington. It's passed and they don't have any idea what the impact is going to be. And it just builds to our mess. It's like a snowball going down the hill. It just gets bigger and bigger because we make these mistakes. Now, what happened was I had a gentleman approach me with a solution. He had a piece of legislation that he says is going to be introduced in the new session. The problem was I took a quick look at it. I didn't get to study it very long. I was trying to eat my dinner at the time, but I did take a look and discuss it with him. And all I saw that he would do is raise the thresholds for reporting on some of the events. But I didn't see it would address all these other issues. Like if you win a jackpot, why should you have to report amounts less than the winnings in a casino? Why is that? Why is that fair? What are they going to do? Are they going to come out to your house and say you need to claim this on your taxes now? You betcha, probably will. And I'm opposed to that. I think it's ridiculous. We need to fix the legislation, but first we need to stop the damage and, in my opinion, start over.
Okay, we'll go to our next question. Again, I'd like to be able to ask a couple additional ones because that's kind of in my wheelhouse as well. But we'll go to the next one. Education is a top concern for many of us, and we know that many schools are suffering with cutbacks. I think I'm not big on this one. Suffering with cutbacks in teachers due to funds. Due to the funds. Your thoughts on what would be helpful in generating revenue for the 50th district schools, and in combination with that, can you tell us your thoughts on consolidation of school districts?
Sure. I believe that the consolidation in some form is going to be inevitable. We're going to have to do this. As far as generating additional revenue for schools, we don't have a lot of options. Right now they're funded out of property taxes. One of the bills that was floated around, or at least concepts, I don't know if it made it into a bill last year, was to fund with sales tax, offset and eliminate property tax in favor of sales tax. On the surface, it looked interesting. It looked like the dollars would balance out. It might be possible. But my concern is really a distrust of what would happen in the future. It's a little like the lottery was going to help offset the senior property tax bills. And I think we know how successful that's been. You get sold a bill of goods. And I think doing a sales tax option was one of those that I wouldn't trust. It would be great if we stick to it, potentially, but down the road there's going to be another crisis, another reason we have to spend, and it's going to result in the property tax coming back on top of the sales tax. You can't keep spending money you don't have and you can't generate it. It would be great. We all want to have everything in the world. My opponent, every time I've heard her speak, has been very clear that she loves everything. Little children, old folks, every program that's out there, every giveaway, transit systems, I've heard it all. I love those things too, but you know what? We have to be adults, and we have to decide what we're going to fund. We have to work within those restrictions. It's uncomfortable, but what about the options for public schools that we haven't explored? okay? Is it really prudent in this day and age to say we must maintain everybody in a classroom, they must sit in front of a teacher, they must have that interaction every day, or do we have options that we can pursue? Are there cyber options for part of what we do? Are there programs that aren't necessary in the schools, alternatives that we may be able to offer less expensively? You know, consolidation is one of those alternatives. Do you consolidate administratively? Maybe. How many superintendents do we need in a county the size of Greene County? Do we really need little kingdoms in every district? I don't think so. And the bottom line is, you're paying for it. I think we need to step up and offer solutions. Doesn't mean necessarily closing every school, doing anything like that. But we need to look for the opportunities where they might exist. And the role of the legislature is to present a playing field where those solutions are available for people to pick from. It's not up to somebody like me to go to Harrisburg and turn around and ram it down everybody's throat and say, this is what you're going to do. But what I can do is go to Harrisburg and say, you know what? The cap per student spending for this year is going to be X amount of dollars. Deal with it. Come up with a budget plan. You know, maybe pace your building of brand new facilities. Maybe renovate some. Maybe look at your transportation costs and how that could be reduced. Can you consolidate administrations? Can you consolidate specialized teaching? Programs for kids that need special learning assistance. Are there options there? Be innovative. The solution cannot continue to be every time we have a problem, we raise taxes in some fashion. We're out of money. It doesn't work anymore. This is why people are upset, and I'm passionate about it. I think the schools are an area that we have to get this under control right now. It's when you have students, the average per student cost in Pennsylvania is almost $15,000 a year per student. That's from the Commonwealth Foundation. You can go online and check it out. There are school districts in this state that spend $25,000 per student in public schools per year. I could send them to major institutions of higher learning for that kind of money. Think about it. What are we getting for that? It's time that we take another look. And I'll just say one thing. Students First is an organization. You can look online. Michelle Ray out of Washington, D.C. They did endorse me this year. They did help fund my campaign. And that's a contribution I gladly accepted because I was there when Michelle Ray made some of the changes to the Washington, D.C. schools. They certainly needed it. And she brought results. And those kinds of programs can work. We have to take the protectionism aspects out of it. It's time. Sorry.
That's all right. Again, I heard no complaint. This again is a question I would have liked to, this is a topic that we've been dealing with our Tea Party in Fayette pretty strongly this year. And I would have liked to have heard both opinions and asked to follow up on this. My concern as a taxpayer in the county is that we have decreasing population, decreasing student enrollment, decreasing school grades, yet we're funding more and more money into the schools. And I would have liked to have heard both of you, speak on that a little bit as well. How do we justify, how do you justify continuing to add to the school budgets and our tax burden without having results for it?
You can't do it. And I didn't even get into the argument that I've made repeatedly about the results as far as testing and the scores these students produce from the learning, the instruction they receive. However, let's just talk about declining populations. Folks, it's real simple. When you have a declining population, you've got less money to work with. That's the way it is. If you got 10 schools, maybe you have to have 9, maybe you have to have 8. Maybe you have to get innovative like I'm talking about with some of the other ways to educate children. You have to make those hard decisions. You can't sit there and refuse to accept the reality of the situation. And it's not just schools, it's anything else that we have to pay for. If our tax base is declining, there's less money available. I don't believe that you're going to send me to Harrisburg to sit there and say, yep, we've got less to work with, but let's ignore reality and spend more. I don't believe that. I can't believe that the people in Harrisburg have gotten away with it this long. And it happens at the county level too, it happens at the local level. We have to accept the reality, and we may have to get by with less. We may have to make some cuts. There might be a program or two that have to go away. We can't keep going this way, folks. I won't. I'll make the hard decisions, and I'll take the heat for it. But you can bet before I make those decisions, I'm going to bring the menu options back and talk about it with as many people as I can. And have forums like this where I explain the reality. I love charts and graphs, a little bit like Ross Perot in that respect. I'll bore the heck out of you maybe, but you'll have all the facts. That's what a legislator has to do. I can't go out there and pledge allegiance to a special interest and vote their way to the detriment of the people here that are counting on me to go do the right thing, and I won't do it. I won't do it. I'll make the hard decisions. That's the way it is.
Okay, let's go to the next question. This is a long one. Our schools have started many new programs to meet the needs of their students. And looking at one of the new programs that has increased the cost of the taxpayers is English as a second language, where we teach immigrant students to speak and understand the English language. Do you feel the PA schools need to do more in tracking illegal immigrants? Currently, Pennsylvania school law requires that students have a birth certificate and can show proof of residency, that's all. And bear in mind, I used to work in immigration.
I'm actually familiar with it too.
True.
Yeah.
I did read that.
Well, okay, we've got a couple things. I don't like this question the way it's put together. I'll be right up front about it. Because there's a whole lot of issues addressed here, and I'm going to just take them and piece them out. Number one, illegal immigration. Worked in a state and in an environment where illegal immigration occurred on a regular basis. It was condoned, in effect, by our federal government, and that was to provide labor for farms and agricultural interest in South Florida when I worked there. I witnessed this firsthand. I witnessed INS, back in those days, INS raids that would bring in a number of buses. They would then corral suspected illegal immigrants, round them up, question them. Typically the ones with families would go into one side, the ones without families would go into another, and they would begin filling the buses. When the buses were full, they would turn around and say to everybody, you may leave, the ones that weren't on the buses for deportation process. It's no way to enforce the law. It's a joke. We have to get serious about it. And I don't care what party you are on this, you know, deep down you know there's something wrong with this. We have laws for a reason. If we want to say we have open borders, fine, then we'll live with the consequences. But until we do, we have to enforce this. If a person is here unlawfully, they are a criminal. That is the way it is. That's what the law says. You have to deal with it. Now, the victims in this, the victims are the kids to an extent. A lot of the immigrants that I was familiar with that were here unlawfully were here for purposes of giving birth to a child, because that child became a United States citizen when they were born here, regardless of the status of the parents. I get it. People want to come to America. I can't blame them. What we have to do to solve this problem, when we look at the people that are coming here, I understand why the agricultural interests need labor like that. I think we need to tie in a program, and I hate talking about these federal programs, but I'm going to lay it out there for you because this was the question, and it affects schools. We have to have a way for migrant workers that want to work agriculturally to come into this country and do it where we don't provide them the benefits or, you know, every program that they might want to sign up for. They can come under some kind of an agreement, temporary work permit, what have you. It needs to be tied to our unemployment index. The higher our unemployment is, the less workers that can come in until our unemployment rate drops. I believe that. Now, once these folks are here, what do we do about it? The solution is not to say, you're here unlawfully, but you know what, we're going to give you all the benefits, including a public education paid for by the citizens of Pennsylvania. That's not a requirement anywhere, if they're not a legal citizen. But what we've got to watch here is, we've got children of parents that were here illegally, as you mentioned, that have a birth certificate and are in fact then, you know, must be provided for. Under the law, when it must be provided, I do believe it must be provided. I don't see how, if we continue to classify these kids in this arrangement, we cannot give them the basic skills to survive and be a contributing member of society. I think we have to do it. But my objection here is the very process that leads to this is what's flawed. And Pennsylvania has to stand up to the federal government and say, we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to accept this. If a child is born in this country unlawfully, to parents that are here unlawfully, that child should not have any expectation of citizenship. It's ridiculous. It's just compounding our problems. And as my opponent would say, she said many times, well, I love children. I don't care if they're here legally or not. I do too. Bottom line is, what other program are we going to cut to pay for it? You have to have priorities. It's tough. This is tough. It's real world. We don't think it's real world because maybe it's not in our face enough. We don't understand the consequences. And I think a lot of people refuse to read the numbers and understand what we're facing in terms of our burdens from government, our fiscal crisis. These things are not going to go away, folks. We are headed down a dangerous path. I believe that. We have to start solving these problems. Illegal immigration creates additional problems. It's the way it is. But if they're here and they meet the requirements and it's lawful, I think we've got to provide at least the basic skills to keep them going.
Okay, I want to do one more question before I bring Ken back up. You've got something to drink?
Yeah.
Pam, do you need anything? She's all right. Okay. Next question, and I just found another sheet of questions, so this could be good. And they're so small type. All right. Drugs are a very real threat to our community and our families. Many employers routinely drug test their employees as a part of their job requirement. What is your position on drug testing those that need assistance from the state welfare system in the form of food stamps, Medicare, medical insurance, and so on? So drug testing for welfare recipients.
This one's very easy to me, and I know I'll be brutalized for my answer, but I stand by it, and that's the way it is. Look, I spent my career working in a profession that I chose, and I was subject to random drug testing at any time. It was a rule and a condition of employment that I agreed to. In order for the paycheck, I had to agree to take the test if my employer said, you're going to be tested. That was it. No exceptions, no conditions. It was a blanket agreement. I entered that willingly and paid huge amounts of taxes on my income to basically provide benefits in the form of money taken from me in taxes to people that didn't earn it, and they had no requirement and no expectation to meet the same standards I had to for employment. I ask you, as Americans, how could that possibly be fair? These folks, and I will guarantee you some folks that receive assistance under these programs desperately need it. I understand that. That's the way it is. Other programs, other folks play the system. I know it. I've seen them. I've met them. I understand it. Some of them play the system to perpetuate their drug habit. They will get money from anywhere they can. Okay? We have an absolute obligation. If we are taking money from hardworking people like you that earn it, and we're going to give it to somebody that didn't, we have to make sure those people will play by our rules. And I am quite comfortable requiring drug testing for anybody that's taking one of the, you'll have to fact check me, 128 separate welfare-related programs that we have? It's a chart, it's on my website, it scares you. But look, if somebody truly needs help, and they're trying to get help, and they're trying to get up and get out of the situation, or maybe they have no option, they have to be willing to agree to play by our rules when they sign up for that program. And I think drug testing should absolutely be a part of it. It may not be feasible to test everyone every time, but I'll tell you, we have to have some serious penalties for people that fail those tests. I would have been fired that day on the spot because I had an option to go seek help. If I didn't and they caught me, I would have been fired. I had to fire employees that failed those drug tests. Think those were good days? No. But I darn well expect somebody that's taken a handout that's been taken from my pocket to comply with something at least as stringent as that. And I know know for the folks that'll watch this later, some of them have a good point. What about the kids? And I said, I did a video on this, I don't necessarily have a solution. Because somebody is dependent on substance and are willing to risk the benefits that might affect their child, I would have to question at a basic level, why are we letting them raise a child? But what do we do about it? I don't have all the answers. This is, I'm not going to, if I was a politician rather than a statesman, I'd stand up here and just give you a load of baloney. I can't do that. I don't have all those solutions. But we've got to start somewhere with working through this problem. We cannot continue to just pass out money to everybody that might vote our way. I don't agree with it.
I'll stop it. One at a time, a little bit. I'm going to add to it, Okay, what I want to do is I want to expand a little bit on this. This is another question I would have loved to have been able to get some back and forth on. The drug testing for welfare recipients is fine. But another question that's come up in this, especially this state right now, is the voter ID issue. And I want to tie that in, or what I would have liked to have tied this into is actual stances with the president right now. And I'd like to have known where your stances are. First off, I'd like to know what is your feeling on the voter ID briefly, and then I'll do a follow-up as far as presidential.
Yeah, one of the most important things we can do as citizens is go out and vote. Because I think we're beginning to understand as a Commonwealth and as a nation what the responsibility is that we're passing on to those people we elect. The amount of control that we give them, the way they can affect our life, it's scary, really. And I think that there's no greater duty that we have as citizens than to go and vote and try to do the right thing. If it's that important, you must understand that when I look out there and I go to a convenience store and somebody walks in to buy a pack of cigarettes, they have to hold up their ID. They buy a bottle of beer, they have to hold up their ID. They want to drive a car, they've got to have ID. They want to go to the Democrat National Convention, they've got to have an ID. It goes on and on and on. If we're not willing to stand up and say, you know what, we want you to vote, but you're going to have to prove who you are when you come to vote. If it's not that important, what do we have left? And I'll tell you this as a legislator. If they will not uphold these voter ID requirements, I'll find a bunch of people out there in Harrisburg that think like I do. They've got to be somewhere. And we'll put legislation in that says you no longer have to produce ID for any purpose in this state. If they won't make it for voting, you shouldn't have to produce it for anything. It's a double standard. I'm sick of it. I think I don't think in this particular area, District 50, we've had a big problem with voter fraud. I really don't think most of the polls, people have been working them for so many years. They know their neighbors, they know the folks. I don't think it's a big problem. You go to urban areas where there are so many people voting in a poll and the people have no clue who they are, it's readily susceptible to fraud. Some of you may have seen the TV thing with a kid that brought down the Acorn organization.
James O'Keefe.
James O'Keefe. He went to Washington, D.C., walked into the poll, and asked to vote as
Eric Holder.
Yeah, Eric Holder. Thank you. Our Attorney General. And they tried to provide him with a ballot. He was smart enough to refuse it at that point so he didn't go to jail. But this is an example of what we're up against. And if it can go on there, it can go on anywhere. Another point to consider with voter ID is that none of the legislation requiring ID in Pennsylvania or elsewhere is so rigid that you do not have another option that I'm aware of. The provisional ballot system, where somebody can vote provisionally if they don't have ID. And then, if the ballot has to be counted and will affect the election, they go through the verification process. It doesn't seem that unreasonable. I know it can be inconvenient, but if this is the most important thing that we do, and that's the way I look at it, I don't think that's asking too much. So I'm passionate about supporting the idea of proving who you are when you go vote. Now, there may be better ways maybe than what we did, but still, you need to be able to prove it.
Well, to continue on with that, like I said, this would have been a perfect opportunity to have both candidates discuss this. I know with the RT Party especially, voter fraud has been a very big issue. And we have found a lot of it actually in this part of the area, especially through there. But train of thought here, and I have to assume, because I don't have a response from the other side, is the vast majority, according to polls locally, the constituents of these couple of counties are very much in favor of voter ID and of drug testing for welfare recipients. However, as far as the presidential election goes, are you willing to back, or was Ms. Snyder willing to back the president's plans, which he's obviously very much against the voter ID. He's actually fought to sue states because of it, and he's also against the drug testing. And where my question is kind of, I know I'm bouncing around with this a little bit, is where each candidate actually stands with their presidential candidates. Do you support President Obama and the fact that he's fought those things, or do you not do that? And again, I have to make an assumption here because I know that candidate Snyder has attended functions from President Obama in the past. I'd like to have been able to hear what her response to this would have been, but how do you feel about that?
Well, Dave, I would say that as far as the polls in the local area, I don't check the polls before I take a position. And this is one I didn't check the polls. I know right from wrong without polling to be sure that I'll be okay. So that's why I took the position I did. I believe what I say to be true and accurate and important. Now, as far as my position on the presidential election, I'm not going to get into specifically the person that I support, but I can tell you, I've gone on the record. I haven't found much of President Obama's policies that I do support. I did kind of like the anti-terrorism approach where we launch missiles to get terrorists, that kind of thing. I'm good. As long as we're sure they're terrorists, I'm kind of good with that. But that's, you know, I mean, honestly, there's so many things, obviously I'm being a little facetious about it, but there's so many things I disagree with the president on. I will point out, this is my opponent's not here, I will answer a part of this for her. She did attend a State of the Union address, and we were treated to media coverage nonstop about how much she embraced Obama's policies. I don't believe voter ID was specifically covered in that article, although almost everything else under the sun was. I will say that when I did the Herald Standard interview, and it's online, you can check this, she was opposed to voter ID at that interview. If my recollection is correct, please verify me on the video from the Herald Standard, it's online, but I believe she was opposed to it. She said it was too cumbersome to do, and I disagree. I think it's absolutely necessary.
I'm going to assume that is a pretty clear distinction between the two.
It is.
Ken, real quick, just a couple more and I'll get you back up. I see there's one more over here, so I'm going to hit a couple of quickies. And this is, again, one we've been fighting very strongly with the Ten Commandments issue in Connellsville and the removal. This next question is on religious freedom. Religious freedom is our First Amendment right. Do you believe specifically that the HHS mandate concerning birth control pills or the morning after pill, etc., which will be being required in the Obamacare insurance policy legislation that's out there now? What are your feelings on that, on the religious freedom aspect, and are we in a battle right now for that?
Well, I looked at this early on. This was in Obamacare, and this was the mandate. I believe specifically it was Catholic churches and universities and hospitals. There were a set of requirements that are basically mandating that they go against their faith and provide birth control. I think it was at no cost, but that wasn't really the issue. The issue was that should this be forced on a religious organization? And I am absolutely opposed to that. I don't think that's appropriate. I believe that when it comes to the separation of church and state, and I've been criticized about this by people that you know, both sides of the issue tend to see this as we want it separate when it doesn't work, to our view, but we're okay with stepping over the line. And I'll give you some examples about this. Somebody had a very heated discussion with me concerning gay marriage. And I'm redirecting a little bit from the birth control issue. But this person was absolutely adamant that government should mandate who can marry who out there. You know, what are the requirements? And I take a different tack with this. I look at the separation of church and state from the standpoint that I don't think the state, being the government, should be in the marriage business at all. I think marriage should be left to the religious, faith-based organizations that choose to marry people. And I did a little historical research on this, and I want to point out what we get for involving government in this. In the 1920s, blacks couldn't marry whites. Whites couldn't marry Hispanics, Filipinos, a whole list, a scary list. That these things were decided by the government. That's as absolutely counterproductive as the government coming in and saying, you will marry people of the same sex. I want government out of the marriage business. If they have to record the deed for legal purposes, I get that, or the contract. But stay out of this. So there's two sides to this. The person that wanted gay marriage outlawed wanted a heavy-handed government. But when you do that, then it works against you because they had the same argument that they didn't want the government to make the birth control mandate. I think government needs to stay out of faith-based organizations. Faith-based organizations are paid for by private citizens that choose to belong. It's a little like being in the club here. You choose to do it, I want government out of it. And I think clearly there needs to be a separation. I will say that in the case of the birth control in the Catholic Church, I viewed Obamacare as basically some type of attack on the Catholic Church or any other religious organization that chooses, as a matter of faith, to not offer birth control. I don't think we should be going down that path. I won't support it personally. I did say online too that just as I don't want government to mandate churches provide birth control, government should not mandate that you cannot have birth control. Again, these are decisions based on the people that choose to worship in the faith. And we need to keep it that way.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and then after Ken is done, I'm going to get back into some of the religious and constitutional aspects of before we finish up.
We're losing audience. Speak with me.
Okay. And this goes back to that presidential issue too. I want to try to touch on that. Since Greene County is one of the largest coal-producing counties in the United States, and thousands of its citizens are proud employees of the coal industry, the question is, what would you do if you were president? And I want to add to that a little bit. But again, because we can't ask your opponent directly, what is your feeling with the president's war on coal issues, and what do you think your opponent might, if she's in agreement with the president, is this one she's also still in agreement with?
Well, I think we've established she's in agreement with the president's policies. Based on the evidence. Now, the war on coal, I don't know. She's taking big money from coal companies. That's there for a reason. So I don't know, I don't know where she's going to come down on this. As far as the war on coal, look, I had a heated discussion on the radio today about this. And I think that the idea of the war on coal, first off, it's not a war against coal mines per se. It's a war against the power plants and the industries that use coal, that burn coal to produce things. That's what the war is. And Obama declared war back in the last election race when he said, you may choose to use coal, but if you do, the prices will necessarily skyrocket and you'll go out of business. Very matter of fact, very relaxed. We caught him in a moment of truth. He actually said what he believed. He's comfortable putting people out of business for using coal. Now, where does this come from? I believe that the war on coal comes from a bunch of academics in positions of power in this administration who don't have the first clue about comprehensive energy policy. They have a lot of theory. They have a lot of ideas. We're paying the price in the 50th district for this. It absolutely must stop. We have to do this. The only way we can do this, because it's being done by an administration, is a change at that level. We need an administration in there that understands. Look, scrubbing technology's gone a long way. It's a lot cleaner than it used to be. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that coal is absolutely clean burning and safe. I don't know. There are probably situations with scrubbers and things where it's better and worse. Natural gas is certainly a lot easier to work with and burn. But instead of that, what our administration wants to do is spend billions or trillions, who knows, on windmills and solar farms. When the technology isn't ready, it isn't effective. If it was effective, the private sector would be in it, just like they're in coal mines and gas wells and oil wells. Okay? So it's a comprehensive policy failure at the highest level. What can we do in Pennsylvania about this? We can act in a coherent fashion to oppose this. Week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I went to Harrisburg with some of the people in this room to attend a rally in the rotunda of the Capitol and speak against the war on coal. And I did that in the middle of a campaign when I had a lot of other things I should have been doing, because I knew it was important and it was the right thing to do. And we have to speak out at every opportunity. Our lifeblood is under the ground here. It's coal, it's gas. Wish it was oil, but they wouldn't let us drill it anyway. But the point is that we have to resist this, and we have to do it at all levels. But you need to elect representation at all levels that feel this way and understand it, and are reasonable people, not academic nitwits that wouldn't understand the issue. It's all theoretical to them, and that's what's running our administration right now. We have to stand up to that. How do I feel? Look, I'm fine with burning coal. We've made a lot of cleanups. Look at how Pittsburgh used to look, for those of you that remember. Look at it now. Those plants did close, I understand, but along the way, when they put in scrubber technology, they got a lot cleaner, and now it's even better. Who's polluting the most right now? I personally believe it's China. We're pushing jobs over there. They're building plants, they're building power stations to burn our coal and other things, and they don't care about the pollution it produces. This is the consequence of bad policy. I want to keep our people working. Certainly some are going to make money in gas, some can make it in coal. We've got to get the job done. On a federal level, since we went there, oil. We need to drill. Drill for as much as we can drill here within our borders and safely offshore. The Gulf's been closed since the BP oil spill. It was clear there were problems there. They identified what the problems were. Instead of learning from it, what was our reaction? Shut it down, shut the Gulf down. And yet, our government gave billions to South American countries to continue oil exploration offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay? Look, I'm one of those guys that it's pretty simple to me. You look at it, it is what it is. And I know some people in here probably differ with my opinion. I'm good with coal. I want to keep it going. I don't have to be paid to support coal or natural gas. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing for our community. It's the right thing for our Commonwealth. It's the right thing for the nation. And when I say community, my constituents, hopefully. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have Ken come on back up and do a couple more environmental questions, and then we'll finish off with the last few. It's getting there. I give you credit. It's you're getting bombarded with one after another. Normally we have the breaks, but we don't have that opportunity this time. So I thank you for taking them rapid fire here. So we'll give you a short one here, and we'll be right back.
All right. Yes, sir.
I feel like when I was a police officer, where were you one night at 7?
Get the
These guys
rubber
get
hose
so many
out.
questions. One thing, while I was sitting here, that doesn't have a question, but I look back at my friend Kenny Amon back there, who's the head of the Archaeological Society down at Calview. And in Article 1, Section 27 of the Constitution of Pennsylvania, which I highly believe is following the constitutional rights, it guarantees every citizen of Pennsylvania clean air, pure water, and a right to aesthetic values. Right now, there's a lot of pipelines coming through our areas, and we know we need to move this natural gas. But factual information and photographic proof is they have moved tombstones to drill wells, they have moved Indian burial mounds to put in pipelines. That actually is probably in violation of the Constitution, because it says aesthetic values for this generation and generations not yet born. It's guaranteed in your Constitution, Article 1, Section 27 of the Constitution. Please read. Every one of you are entitled to these rights. How would you handle some of these disruptions of these archaeological sites and grave sites that are being moved and some of the forced deforestations that's going on by putting in 100-foot right-of-ways, we could probably get away with 50-foot right-of-ways.
Well, you know, it's an interesting issue. I'm a passionate student of history, not officially, I don't have a PhD in it, but I do care a great deal about our history. And now I'm assuming that what you're telling me is correct, Ken. I haven't looked at the evidence or researched burial mounds and tombstone disturbances. I can understand that it probably happens. There are ways to mitigate, you know, we do it with construction, it's happened with highways. When you have to disturb a cemetery, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. I'm not saying it's good. We've done a great job here of avoiding some of them, where, you know, we've worked around even the interstate out on the hill. Nice cemetery up there, they actually, you know, worked that out. But what we have to do is we have to look at our regulations, look at the people that enforce the regulations, and try to ensure they have a good deal of common sense and the flexibility to do the right thing here. When we talk about the size of the right-of-ways, you know, the first way to approach this is to understand why are the right-of-ways being cut at the width they're being cut. What's the reason? We have to explore this, we have to understand this. It doesn't seem like a foreign concept to me that when you're in a sensitive area, you try to minimize the impact. It seems like it could be done. The problem is that I have no idea, and I doubt very many people really do unless they research this. What's real about this? What has gone on over the years? What are the multitude of regulations? Experts, a lot more focused in this than I am, would have to answer that question. But the way I would explore it is to try to find out what the reasons are. Indian burial mounds, look, you know, I kind of feel a little passionate about leaving them alone. You may have to move your pipeline a little bit, and I know that's problems if you've negotiated right away and didn't know the mound was there. I get it. But to me, you know, I kind of think we ought to leave them alone. And as to how we get there again, it's through the government's purpose, really. I mean, one of the fundamentals is a regulatory authority. And we have to look at that. I don't think we've done a good job in a lot of areas. We've done okay, though. I'm not ready to condemn all the things that have been done, because we are having to drop a lot of pipelines in, a lot of wells in, and it's important. So I think we've done okay. I think we can do better.
We haven't done okay.
Okay.
There's 9 laws protecting these sites. I know one of them they destroyed. It's recorded in Harrisburg and registered for the museum. And William Rice, who found Rice's landing, pushed him stone off his grave, busted up 45 feet away.
I'd have to defer to you. I don't have the background, and I respect that. And if that's the case, I mean, again, there should be remedies for this. It shouldn't be that hard.
None.
We can defer this to after the questions.
Yeah,
okay.
I'd like to know more.
Yeah, we'll update you on it with photographic evidence. All right, question. The DEP is responsible for the Clyde mine discharge. They are responsible
Which
for
mine?
Clyde mine by pit gas. The mine has been filled with raw water, and it is dumping directly into 10 Mile Creek. The fact is, if you go by today, that creek is about the color of this tablecloth right now after this rain. How would you address this problem, since it will affect Tri-County's raw water supplies? And in addition to that, would you support the Monongahela River Basin Commission to protect our waters?
I'll go a step further. This is the time to get into it. It's going to take probably a little longer than 2 minutes, but I'm going to tell you what I see here. We have water that's being produced by energy extraction that is contaminated at different levels. Coal mines are handled one way, the fracking water's handled another right now. As far as what's in it, we don't test coal mine discharge for fracking chemicals right now. As I understand it, you experts correct me if I'm wrong, but the bottom line is we're producing a tremendous amount of energy-related wastewater in our area. We do it through active operations and, as you mentioned, closed mines. I talked to some experts, some mining engineers, along the way of the campaign. I am led to believe there is no way to seal up the inside of a mine so that this water would not accumulate and be produced under current technology. Everybody kind of says maybe someday. But right now, we're not there. So we can't fill it with a big bunch of foam or something else that would exclude the water from sitting in there and collecting the damaging contents. Now, so we know we've got active mines, we've got a lot of closed ones, we're going to have more. We're going to have more mines closed over the years. We've got more energy to extract in the form of gas. This is going to happen. What I think we should be looking at is regionalizing the way the wastewater is treated. This is a big undertaking. This is a concept, folks. I want you to understand. I can't go to Harrisburg and slap down legislation and say, let's get this done. But it's a concept about the way we should approach this. I think that the energy that's being extracted should pay the bill for the water treatment. Mines currently run their own treatment facilities. We have to properly treat the gas water byproducts and get that dealt with. We can do that here. We can do that on a regional level so that it makes sense and tack the fees onto the energy that we're extracting. And hey, how about a higher fee for energy that's being shipped overseas? Let's get a little payback for all those oil prices we've paid over the years. I mean, you know, again, I'm being facetious, but maybe we could explore that. The bottom line is if we treated this water properly through regionalized facilities, it would save the companies doing the extraction on a concept level. They could save it because we could have collection pipelines and distribution pipelines for the treated water that make sense and meet needs. The industry requires water as a part of what it does. When it's drilling, it requires water. Why not use the treated wastewater, but treat it? And why don't we take the clean water after we've treated it and discharge it into head streams, the head of the streams here, where we need to increase the flow to keep it going. It's a concept, it's about how you look at this. I don't think the piecemeal process that we're using, allowing mines to open, then close, and make no provision for the water, is ever going to be effective. We have to deal with this long term. If we do it the right way, the energy we're extracting today could help offset some of the sins of yesterday, like the Clyde mine you're speaking of, the still pumping water at it. As I understand it, and again, I'm not an expert, the only way to stop that water from coming out is to pump it to a level below where it's perfect. Now that's what I'm led to believe. The only way you're going to do that is to treat it, or it's going to continue to run into streams. As far as a basic commission, I need to know more.
I'll be glad to sit down with you. To add to what Mark said, and I don't mean to take away from you, and to inform some of the public here, there's 1.8 trillion gallons of water underground right now that's going to come out someplace. It is projected by all the engineers that I've talked to that pit gas mine will overflow around April along with the Clyde mine. And it came very close at the Shannon until Nana started pumping. I just want you to know that.
Is that trillion figure Green County?
That's all the mines in the area in the Mon River Basin.
In the Mon River Basin.
1.8 trillion. We'll get more information. We're attending a symposium tomorrow on this.
And hey, listen, I'm sorry, if I could just add one more thing. Look, when we talk concepts like that, I think that could be a win-win. Because if the energy companies look at what I'm saying, there's a way to reduce their costs. They don't have to have separate facilities now. They could work in a regional concept. Could be done through an authority. I don't know, but it's conceptual. I think there could be a way to do this. But it needs to be a win-win. I think we can do that. The way we're going with 1 trillion gallons of water sitting in abandoned mines, assuming that number's correct, again, look where we're headed. And these mines, are there any mines that will not leak when they flood?
No, did I know it?
And see, I don't think so either. The people I talked to said that every mine will expel water somewhere, as it floods. So it's scary.
It's the height of the aquifer, it's going to come out. All right, last question I have for you, and please, on this question, there's some mathematics in here. Feel free to say, Ken, explain it to me, okay? I will do that, and I'll explain it to y'all. This is one time we're going to get him for, okay? All right, the water withdrawal from the withdrawal of water from the Marcellus drilling is taxing our water supplies and the wastewater from the drilling is potential hazard to our area's water supplies. What would you do to secure safe water discharges from drilling operations? And how would you protect the amount of water being withdrawn? And do you support the Q7-10 policy set up by the Susquehanna River Basin Commission and the DEP to be implemented in our area?
No idea.
Okay, let me explain it to you. Does anyone in here know what I'm talking about? Okay. There are, and I hate to do this, but it's supposed to be a question. But in order for Mark to answer a question, I think he has to understand where it's coming from. There's a Delaware River Basin Commission and a Susquehanna River Basin Commission. And when it came to the Monongahela River, there was no money for the Monongahela River Basin Commission. I have a sneaking suspicion industry kept it out of here, because they have the authority to regulate what goes and what levels are put in our water, drinking water. The Q-7 policy was brought forth, and North Branch of 10 Mile Creek went dry. I photographed it and sent it to Mr. Hanger, who was in charge of the DEP at that time. He came back with a policy that the Susquehanna River Basin Commission came up, and it was called Q7-10. What that means is if you take the flow of the river, gallons per minute, gallons per second, whatever, cubic feet per second, whatever you want to do it, past a given point for 7 days. That would be like the first month of August, or the first week of August, the second week of August, the third week of August, the fourth. And you get an average of how much water is going by this given point. You are allowed to take, minus 10% of that water. In other words, if 100 gallons is the average water flowing by a given point for 7 days, the first week in August, you have to let 90 gallons go down the stream, but you're allowed to extract 10 for industry. What that does is assure that there's a dilution factor, plus it keeps the stream and the aquatics and the drinking water that's necessary for all of us on down below. It keeps it going. Right now, when I asked the DEP about Q7-10, the mining division of California, their water people, they didn't even know this thing existed, and it's their rule. I'm serious. It's their rule. So, do you think we should watch our water withdrawals? Do you think we should follow this Q7-10 and protect the water to enable us to have dilution factors for what is we can't control? The old added solution, pollution is dilution.
I'm going to have to say clearly, I think I would be more in favor of a Q9-6,
Okay.
based on my profound knowledge of the subject.
Okay.
No idea. I don't know if it makes sense or not. I mean, plain and simple, I'd have to spend a weekend doing some real relaxing reading to fully get what the history is and how this number was derived. And see, this is the scary part about being a legislator, because you have good folks with good information that come to you, and how on earth do you ever decipher this? The bottom line here, let me translate into normal speak, if you will. Please don't be offended, but the reality is, what I talked about as a concept for treating the wastewater would actually solve some of this problem, because if we were collecting the water and treating it and then discharging the water, you can also collect fracking water at different points along the way. There'd be no reason not for a fracker not to use it. And we can also fill from the treated water, possibly following some of the same pipelines, so we don't cut right-of-ways too far apart. You see where I'm going here? I mean, there are ways to get to this, but we have to look at the feasibility, the cost. We've got to bring in experts we trust. And one of the most important things is we have to bring in experts from all sides of the issue. Because there are so many aspects of this. This is what we should be doing. I don't think that's been done here to the level it should be in our region. And the evidence was right there with the basins that we don't have the basin here, but we've got it other places. My dad always used to say, when you drive to Harrisburg, the roads get better. The further east you go. He always used to say that. I laughed at it. But really, I mean, again, I'm the kind of person that's smart enough to know when they don't know, and know when we need to get help. And the point of it is, we have a lot of talent here and a lot of interest in the community that can advise us on these things and help develop a solution. I like it. I like doing it as a group. getting them together, getting the different interests together, and working through the issue. I'll be that kind of representative. That's been my career. I'll continue to do it, representing the people.
That concludes all the questions I have for you, Mark.
Thank you.
So
No
I
problem.
would have really liked, I'm going to take you out for another light burial night. So I'm going to, I am sorely glad that you came here today and to discuss these issues with us. Like I said, we're a nonpartisan organization, but I think every issue that I brought up here about clean water affects each and every one of us. And I keep saying two things. One, there is a Pennsylvania west of Harrisburg. Number two, in order to get solutions done, throw everybody in a room and lock the door and don't come out until they're done. Let's get her done, Larry the Cable Guy. And that's what we need to do.
I'll sure try.
Thank you all.
I'm not gonna let y'all look that easy, I still got a lot more for you.
I like good.
But not many. We are drawing to an end here, for a number of reasons. First off,
Is it possible for me to make a statement right now about the situation?
any problem with that? Go right ahead.
All right. Folks, I just want to say to you that it is truly sad, because the purpose of a debate, you can see from the questions tonight, everybody would have had a chance to answer, go back and forth, and wrestle with ideas and concepts. Now, unfortunately, because my opponent chose not to attend, we don't have that opportunity. I've tried to cover it in the videos on my website, the outreach that I've done, the many, many meetings I've attended, the groups I've participated in, dinners, discussions, whatever. It's all I can do. It's the only option I have. But I think that when you've got two people competing for a seat that's open, and neither one has any kind of experience to hang their hat on in this role, and it's much different than being a county commissioner. I firmly believe that, and I think the experience ahead will bear that out. I think it's absolutely imperative that the parties sit down and give the people a choice. Today in the paper, my opponent said this election is about name recognition. She hopes. That's what she said. She hopes that it's about name recognition. That means that all this discussion and all this time and effort that I put into trying to explain where I stand on issues, which you may agree with or you may not agree with, I think at least you understand where I stand. And you understand that I'm not going to dodge the hard questions. I'm going to answer them. I think that's the takeaway, and that's what's so critical about this election. I hope people do look a little more deeply into the candidates and understand who's trying to do the right thing. You may disagree that it's the best thing for Harrisburg, I don't know. But I think I can go out there and have a profound impact. And I wish my opponent would have stepped up to the plate today and come here and participated in this. We'd have had a lot better session, and you wouldn't be bored senseless listening to me. So anyway, thank you.
Well, I think with that, what I'm going to do is, I haven't stopped the questions at this point, but what I'm going to do,
I want to give the audience a chance.
I'll do that as well. I'm going to do a bit of a closing statement since I have the available time, and then I'm going to let you do a closing statement, and then if anyone wants to ask questions. I just want everybody to understand this. You know, the Fayette Patriots, the local Tea Party here, We the People, Greene County, and the Isaac-Walton Lake are all constituents in this area. I was very, very disappointed to find out that one of the opponents would not debate. Now, I find it reprehensible that someone running for our trust, looking for our trust for our vote, refuses to come out and speak. And I've heard several excuses, everything from it's too busy to the fact that the VFW serves alcohol, which was funny because she held a fundraiser right after that in a VFW. She didn't give us the chance to show that we can do this very fair. We've done it in the past, we've done it very professionally, and we've had compliments from the Democrats and the Republicans together. That's the point. It's the constituency here that's important. Not name recognition, not anything else. It's we the people, it's us. And I find it very, very disappointing that anyone would not take an opportunity to step in front of their constituents and answer questions and show just what they're made out of when they are asking for one of our most sacred things, our vote. And I hope that your opponent understands that no matter what happens with this election, this isn't the end. You know, we're going to, and this goes for you as well if you win, you're not going to hear the end of us. We are the constituents. We are the people here. And we will hold your feet to the fire, and we will question you or Pam, whichever one gets this office. And I promise you, you cannot ignore the grassroots anymore. And that may prove to be a very large mistake on her part. I hope that in the future, that any group that would come out and ask to hold a forum like this and give the opportunity for candidates to face the public, that you both would take advantage of that, or any other candidate would take advantage of that. Like I said, I've seen some very poor excuses for this, but we have held debates like this before with hundreds and hundreds of people at them with no complaints whatsoever. There was absolutely no reason not to be here tonight. We did give multiple options as far as dates. I've made personal phone calls that have never been returned, and I know the other two groups have done that as well. So I want to thank you for the fact that you did show up and you did do what a person running for office should do. And it's up to the people to decide on where you stand and whether they're going to vote for you or not. It's a shame that we didn't have the opportunity to do that with both sides. So with that being said, I do want to give you a couple minutes to do a closing statement. And if you're willing to take questions, we'll be happy to do
Sure.
that.
I committed to doing that, and I intend to. Listen, I want to thank everyone sincerely for coming out on a really lousy night. I appreciate you listening to one person drone on and on with answering. But I want to point out the questions. Questions were good. I disagree, with maybe the way some of them were constructed, but this isn't a presidential debate. We're running for state representative, for Pete's sakes. You got to deal with it. But I would say they were fair, and that was important. And I think we explored a lot of areas. I know I had a lot of fun, even though this was kind of excruciating. But I had a lot of fun. And I'm going to tell you a couple things about the future. If I am sent to Harrisburg, one thing is for sure, I may not have all the answers. I don't think anyone going into this job could, and I don't think it's the point to have the answers. It's about knowing how to ask the questions and how to get the results. That's what matters. I hope I have demonstrated to you tonight and through other media that I'm not afraid of the tough questions. And I know that I'm not perfect with every answer. I accept that. It's called being human. If I was too polished, what would be the point? We have to try to explain things and work through issues. That's what I want to do. I want to do that for the 50th District. I think I can do a good job. I think I can stand up in Harrisburg and hold my own and force issues and get results. And I want to point out that my opponent, by not coming here, refused to answer that question for you. She didn't demonstrate whether she could think on her feet or answer questions that were tough and maybe a little disjointed sometimes. You didn't get to see any of that. And I think it's important to keep that in mind going into the election. And I'm going to make you one pledge, because I'm not a politician, so I'm allowed to make a pledge. If I am successful and go to Harrisburg and represent you for the next 2 years, when this situation is reversed some 13 months from now, or whatever it's going to be, I will not refuse to debate, regardless of who the opponent is. As a person occupying that seat, I will never step up and so arrogantly proclaim myself to be the only fit person for the seat and refuse to debate a challenger. It's our obligation to keep your trust and demonstrate our capability. And I have no problem with that. I don't care how ridiculous the challenger is. I will come back and I will do this. You can take that to the bank. I believe it's that important to the process. Okay? I want to thank you again. I would, take the opportunity to ask for your vote. If I can't get your vote, I'd at least ask for your consideration and thought. Go visit my website. I've got cards to tell you how to get to it. And I'm going to stay as late as we need to take individual questions. I don't have a problem with that.
I just want to make one other statement also. I want to make sure to the public and the press and anyone else that hears this statement. The era in southwest Pennsylvania of the same old politics, folks, is gone. With the Tea Parties and the other groups that are out there and the citizens that have become awakened, we are not going to allow what we've dealt with for so many decades to continue. We will stay out on the politicians. We will question them. We will demand answers. This tonight was unacceptable. And this is forewarning. If this happens again in any other realm, when the public is asking a question and we get refused by that person who we're paying for, there will be hell to pay. We will be right there to watch every move that is made from then on. The era of old school politics in southwestern Pennsylvania is gone. And I want to thank you again, Mark. I want to thank you again for taking the grueling and the punishment tonight. And yes, it is a terrible night out, and I'm very happy to have all you folks that didn't make it out. Please be safe going home, and please continue to educate yourself and continue to make wise choices and continue to vote. It's the only way we take this country back, folks. Have a good night. Does anyone have any questions?
Wait, see first question.
Anyone have any questions before we go? Anyone have a raincoat? Go ahead.
I have a comment. Jim Witt from We the People of High Valley
Thank you.
emailed me, and he wanted me to remind everybody that this was the job interview for Mark and Pam. This is our job interview is We the People giving them a job interview. And from what I've learned in the past, someone doesn't show up to a job interview, they don't get the job. That's one comment. The second comment I'd like to say is, I think, Mark, tonight the best answer you gave was when you were honest and you didn't flub and make us, oh, I think this, I think that. You were honest, and that's what we are longing to hear, an honest person. So I applaud you for that.
I'll stay and answer individually. If nobody in the group had questions, but if someone wants to talk to me, I'll be here. So thank you, everybody.
Good night, folks. God bless.